Hey Cowboys Nation, let's go for another round of news from America's team. Watch until the end so you don't miss any news and sign up to stay tuned for everything that comes out about the Cowboys.
Lewis on Zimmer scheme, it's our job to perform. There hasn't been much done in 2024 free agency by the Dallas Cowboys, but easily one of the most important was convincing Jordan Lewis to stick around for the coming season in the midst of an exodus of talent, mostly defensive, to the Washington Commanders and Dan Quinn. Lewis staying put in Dallas is critical for what the club is hoping to field at cornerback, serving as a playmaking nickel corner that allows Trevon Diggs and Darren Bland to play freely on the boundaries, where the two all-pro talents have set records. Diggs is returning from a torn ACL suffered last September, and climbing back from a devastating injury is something Lewis knows more about than he'd care to. In 2022, he suffered a shattered foot that nearly medically retired him, but 1 year later, he was back on the field for the Cowboys, and later in the season, back to top form and forcing takeaways. There were always dark times, he said recently. I knew I was going to come back, but I didn't know what timeline it would be. I didn't start playing well until a quarter of the season was over. That was really where the dark times were, trying to get back to form and performing to my best abilities. I could always play, but making plays and being as explosive as I can. And you can count Bland in as one of many who are thrilled at Lewis' decision to stick around. That's big, he said of Lewis re-signing. Jordan Lewis, for the last couple of years, has been a leader for the defense. To have him again this year is going to be good for us. It's the resurgence in late 2023 that showed the Cowboys what Lewis was still capable of. But now he'll have to adapt to yet another change at defensive coordinator. The hiring of Mike Zimmer, following the departure of Dan Quinn, marks the fourth coordinator change for Lewis in his 8-year career. In other words, averaging a coordinator change every 2 seasons, he knows what it takes to embrace a new scheme and thrive as if he's been in it for years. There is definitely going to be a learning curve whenever you play for a new coordinator, he said, but at the same time, we're professionals. That's our job to go out there and perform in any scheme that we're in. That task effectively ramps up when the Cowboys depart for training camp in Oxnard on July 22nd, and there's little time for the defense to find their land legs in Zimmer's scheme. One thing is for certain, Lewis is ready. He has always been. Proposed Cowboys trade sees CeeDee Lamb unloaded for 2-time national champ. If the Dallas Cowboys are forced to trade CeeDee Lamb, an out-of-conference foe could be an ideal trade partner. The 25-year-old receiver skipped the team's mandatory minicamp and missed all of the team's voluntary organized team activities as he holds out for a new contract. The 3-time Pro Bowler is entering the final year of his rookie contract, which will pay him slightly less than $18 million. If the Cowboys can't work out a deal with him, they will have to explore a trade. In a list of proposed trade scenarios compiled by Bleacher Report's Brad Gagnon, one of the deals proposed involves the Cowboys dealing Lamb to the Los Angeles Chargers in exchange for rookie receiver Ladd McConkey and a first-round draft pick. The argument is simple. The Cowboys would benefit from cap savings by unloading Lamb for a rookie receiver, and they would be trading Lamb to an AFC team unlikely to contend for a Super Bowl during the 2024 season. Dallas would struggle to turn down the immediate cap savings and the significant 2025 draft capital influx, especially with a bright young receiver in Ladd McConkey coming back to try to strike gold with Dak Prescott. Gagnon wrote, Ladd McConkey impressed a star receiver with Georgia Bulldogs. The Chargers selected McConkey with the 34th overall pick in the second round of the 2024 NFL Draft. The 6-foot, 185-pound receiver doesn't exactly possess prototypical size for a starting receiver, but he was a highly accomplished target while playing for the Georgia Bulldogs. The 22-year-old won 2 national championships while starring at Georgia, including his 2022 season where he posted 58 receptions for 762 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. McConkey posted 5 receptions for 88 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns in the 65-7 win over the TCU Horned Frogs in the 2022 national championship. As Gagnon mentioned, the Chargers, who would be seeking a viable receiver for star quarterback Justin Herbert, would acquire one of the best weapons in the league in Lamb after losing his top 2 receivers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, during the offseason. In this case, it would be a chance for Jim Harbaugh and company to maximize their support for Justin Herbert at a critical juncture of his career, Gagnon wrote. And like New England, the Los Angeles Chargers have the cap space while also not being considered a primary contender. Why Cowboys could be forced to consider CeeDee Lamb trade and considering whether to trade Lamb or sign him to a contract extension, the Cowboys will need to take into account the upcoming mega money deals for star quarterback Dak Prescott, who will likely earn at least $50 million annually, and linebacker Micah Parsons, who is projected to earn $32 million annually on his next deal, according to ESPN's Bill Barnwell. According to Spatrack, Lamb's projected contract value is $136 million over 4 years at an average annual value of $34 million. Considering the Minnesota Vikings just signed Justin Jefferson to a $140 million deal across 4 years, $35 million per year, the Cowboys would likely be forced to tack on some extra dollars to surpass that deal. These Cowboys could be surprise cut candidates in 2024. As we head towards the 2024 season, the Cowboys roster is still a work in progress. Countless moves will be made before the 53-man roster is complete. That can happen with trades, cuts, or new signings. It's a long and tedious process that always includes at least a few surprises. Think back to Dan Bailey being released, Dez Bryant and Ezekiel Elliott, and young guys like Jabril Cox last year. As much as we can project, there will always be a surprise or two. This year will be no different. The Cowboys roster is younger and more inexperienced than usual after countless players left in free agency. And when you're dealing with unproven talent, some guys rise up out of nowhere, and some falter. The question for Dallas is who will fall into those categories. With that in mind, let's take a look at a few guys who could be this year's surprise cut. Wide receiver, Jalen Tolbert. This entire offseason has included excitement about former third-round pick Jalen Tolbert. With Michael Gallup out of the picture and no external WR3 brought in, Tolbert falls next in line. But what if he doesn't live up to the WR3 expectations? We do have to remember he only has 280 career yards for a reason. Tolbert has had opportunities over his first 2 seasons. He just hasn't capitalized on them to this point. If that trend stays throughout the preseason process, why shouldn't he be on the chopping block? It would allow Dallas to give more snaps to young receivers like Jalen Brooks and Ryan Flournoy. Both of those guys are getting some big hype right now, and the Cowboys could prefer them. Tolbert should not be considered a lock for the roster just because he was a top 100 pick 3 years ago. Quarterback Cooper Rush. 4 years ago, Dallas waived backup quarterback Cooper Rush. A stint with the Giants and a return to the Cowboys later, and Rush has a 5-1 career record as a starter. That still might not be enough for him to keep his job this summer. Heading into this season, Trey Lance needs a spot. Dallas invested a 4th-round pick into him for a reason. If he isn't ready to back up Dak Prescott now, he won't ever be. And Rush stands in the way. The veteran quarterback knows the system well and has shown an ability to win, but prioritizing the development of Lance may be more important. If Lance has a strong showing in the lead-up to the season, he has to be on the roster. Keeping 3 quarterbacks, when depth elsewhere is so needed for Dallas, is a tough sell. Moving on from Rush does hurt your insurance at QB, but it adds a spot for somebody else who might get real playing time. Cornerback Jordan Lewis. It pains me to add longtime Cowboys cornerback Jordan Lewis to this list. J. Lew has been with Dallas since they drafted him in 2017. Since that time, he's been a stable, reliable option at slot corner, but he might just be running out of time. There is a plethora of young corners waiting in the wings, whether it be rookie Kalen Carson, hybrid DB Israel Mukuamu, second-year man Eric Scott Jr., or Nashan Wright. All of these guys bring something to the table. With Lewis on a 1-year deal, he could become expendable to these guys who haven't reached their full potential. Giving them a shot may be worth it, especially in the case of guys like Carson and Scott, who Dallas used decent draft capital on. You want to see what they have, and you already know what Lewis will bring. He is a fan favorite and a great veteran to have. It might just be a numbers game when it comes to Lewis' spot on the 53-man roster this time.